I thought I was invisible to the world, just another face in the crowd trying to make ends meet. But when I walked into that luxury store wearing my thrift shop clothes, I never expected the humiliation that followed would lead to the most extraordinary encounter of my life. What happened next changed everything I believed about kindness, dignity, and the power of standing up for what's right. Stay with me, because this story will restore your faith in humanity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah, and 6 months ago I was living paycheck to paycheck in the small town of Brookfield, working double shifts at Miller's Diner just to keep my tiny apartment. Every morning at 5, I'd drag myself out of bed, put on my worn uniform, and spend the next 12 hours serving coffee and taking orders from people who barely acknowledged my existence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and I took pride in doing it well. The thing about being poor is that it makes you invisible in ways most people never understand. When you're counting every dollar, when your clothes come from thrift stores, and your shoes have holes you try to hide, society has a way of looking right through you. You become part of the background, someone people step around rather than engage with. I'd grown used to that invisibility, even found comfort in it sometimes. But there was one dream that kept me going through those endless shifts and sleepless nights. My younger brother Danny had been accepted to State University on a partial scholarship, but we still needed $3,000 for his first semester. Danny was brilliant, the kind of kid who could solve calculus problems in his head and write essays that made teachers cry. He deserved every opportunity in the world, and I was determined to make sure he got them. For 8 months, I'd been saving every extra penny, working overtime whenever possible, even selling plasma twice a week to add a few more dollars to Danny's college fund. I kept the money in a savings account I never touched, watching it grow slowly but steadily toward our goal. By the end of summer, I was just $200 short of what we needed. That's when Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, mentioned that her granddaughter was getting married and had asked her to sell some family jewelry that had been sitting in her attic for decades. Mrs. Henderson was 83 and barely got around anymore, so she asked if I'd be willing to take the pieces to a few shops and see what they were worth. She promised me 20% of whatever we could get for them. The jewelry was beautiful, clearly vintage, with intricate designs and what looked like real gemstones. Mrs. Henderson wasn't sure of their value, but she thought they might be worth something substantial. If I could get a good price for them, my commission would be enough to cover Danny's remaining tuition costs. I started with the smaller jewelry shops downtown, but they either weren't interested or offered prices that seemed insultingly low. That's when someone suggested I try Prestige Fine Jewelers on the wealthy side of town. It was the kind of place I'd never set foot in under normal circumstances, but I figured the worst they could do was say no. The morning I decided to visit Prestige, I put on my best outfit, which admittedly wasn't saying much. My nicest pair of jeans, a sweater I'd found at Goodwill that only had one small hole near the hem, and my only pair of dress shoes that I'd bought for my high school graduation 5 years earlier. I brushed my hair carefully and even put on a little makeup, trying to look as presentable as possible. Prestige Fine Jewelers was located in the Grandview shopping district, where every storefront gleamed with expensive displays and perfectly manicured landscapes. The building itself was all marble and glass, with security cameras and a doorman who looked like he earned more in a month than I made in 3. As I approached the entrance, I could feel my confidence wavering. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I didn't belong. The store was like something out of a movie, with crystal chandeliers, plush carpeting, and display cases filled with jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. Classical music played softly in the background, and the air smelled like expensive perfume and leather. There were 3 employees visible when I entered, all dressed in immaculate suits and speaking in hushed, reverent tones to customers who clearly belonged in this world. I stood near the entrance for several minutes, clutching Mrs. Henderson's jewelry in a simple cloth bag, waiting for someone to acknowledge my presence. Finally, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a condescending smile approached me. His name tag read Marcus Senior Sales Associate, and everything about his demeanor suggested he'd already decided I was wasting his time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus asked, his tone making it clear that Helping me was the last thing he wanted to do. His eyes swept over my appearance, taking in my thrift store clothes and scuffed shoes with obvious disdain. "I have some vintage jewelry that I'd like to have appraised," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. I was told this was the best place in town for that kind of evaluation. Marcus's expression shifted from condescension to barely concealed annoyance. "I see. And these pieces, are they family heirlooms?" The way he said it made it sound like a ridiculous possibility. "They belong to my neighbor," I explained. "She's elderly, and asked me to help her find out what they're worth. I have a letter from her giving me permission to act on her behalf." "Of course you do," Marcus said with a smirk that made my cheeks burn. "Well, let's have a look then, shall we?" I carefully removed the jewelry from the cloth bag, laying each piece on the velvet-lined tray Marcus provided. There was a stunning pearl necklace with what appeared to be diamond accents, a pair of emerald earrings that caught the light beautifully, and an ornate gold bracelet with intricate engravings. Marcus barely glanced at the pieces before pushing the tray back toward me. "I'm afraid these aren't the kind of items we typically handle," he said dismissively. "They look like costume jewelry, probably worth a few dollars at most. You might try a pawn shop." I knew enough about jewelry to recognize that he was lying. The weight of the pieces, the quality of the settings, the way the stones caught and reflected light, these were clearly valuable items. But Marcus had already made up his mind based on my appearance, deciding that someone like me couldn't possibly have access to anything of real worth. "Are you sure?" I asked politely. "I'd really appreciate it if you could take a closer look. The stones seem quite authentic, and the craftsmanship is extremely detailed." Marcus's facade of politeness finally cracked completely. "Listen," he said, his voice growing louder and attracting the attention of other customers. "I've been in this business for 15 years. I can spot costume jewelry from across the room. These pieces are worthless, and frankly, I'm questioning how you came to possess them in the first place." The implication was clear and humiliating. He was suggesting I'd stolen them. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger, but I tried to remain calm. "I have documentation proving my neighbor gave me permission to sell these items on her behalf." "Documentation can be forged," Marcus said coldly. "And even if it's legitimate, I'm not interested in wasting any more of my time on this. I think it's best if you leave now." The other customers were staring now, some with curiosity, others with the same dismissive judgment I saw in Marcus's eyes. I felt small and ashamed, even though I'd done nothing wrong. The security guard had noticed the commotion and was moving in our direction. "Please," I said quietly. "I just need to know what they're worth. It's for my brother's college tuition." "That's enough," Marcus said sharply. "Security, please escort this woman out. And make sure she doesn't come back." The humiliation was complete. As the security guard approached, I quickly gathered Mrs. Henderson's jewelry and put it back in the cloth bag. My hands were shaking with embarrassment and frustration. I'd never felt so small, so worthless, so completely judged, based on nothing more than the clothes I wore and the car I couldn't afford. Other customers watched as I was escorted toward the door, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. I could hear whispered comments about people like that, and how they even got in here. Each word felt like a slap across the face. Just as the security guard was about to usher me outside, a calm voice spoke from behind us. "Excuse me, what exactly is going on here?" I turned to see a man I hadn't noticed before, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes. He was dressed simply but expensively, in a way that suggested real wealth rather than the flashy displays I'd seen from other customers. There was something about his presence that commanded immediate respect. Marcus immediately straightened up, his entire demeanor changing. "Mr. Davidson, I didn't see you come in. This woman was trying to pass off some costume jewelry as valuable pieces. When I explained that we couldn't help her, she became difficult." "Difficult how?" the man asked, his tone neutral but somehow carrying weight. "She refused to accept my evaluation and kept insisting the pieces were valuable," Marcus said, clearly uncomfortable under the man's steady gaze. "Did you actually examine the jewelry?" Mr. Davidson asked, Marcus hesitated. Well, I could tell from a glance that it wasn't worth our time. I see, Mr. Davidson said quietly. Then he turned to me with a gentle smile. I'm sorry you've been treated this way. Would you mind if I took a look at the pieces myself? I was so surprised by his kindness that I almost didn't respond. After the humiliation I'd just endured, having someone treat me with basic human dignity felt almost overwhelming. Of course, I managed to say. I'd appreciate that very much. Mr. Davidson gestured toward a private consultation area. Why don't we sit down and examine everything properly? He looked at Marcus with an expression that was polite, but unmistakably commanding. Please bring us your best magnifying equipment and have someone prepare proper evaluation sheets. Marcus looked like he wanted to object, but something about Mr. Davidson's quiet authority made him comply immediately. As we walked toward the consultation area, I couldn't help but wonder who this man was and why his simple presence had transformed the entire dynamic of the situation. What I didn't know was that Mr. Davidson was about to change not just my day but my entire understanding of what's possible when someone with power chooses to use it for kindness rather than exclusion. The next few minutes would prove that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when we least expect them, and that dignity isn't determined by the clothes we wear or the money in our bank accounts. As Mr. Davidson and I settled into the elegant consultation area, I watched him carefully examine each piece of Mrs. Henderson's jewelry with the attention and respect that Marcus had refused to give. He used a professional jeweler's loupe, turning each item slowly under the bright examination light, studying the settings, the stones, and the craftsmanship with genuine expertise. The difference in treatment was so stark, it almost brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who saw past my worn clothes and scuffed shoes to treat me like a human being deserving of basic courtesy. After the humiliation I'd just experienced, his kindness felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in shame and embarrassment. These are extraordinary pieces, Mr. Davidson said quietly, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. The pearl necklace alone is museum quality. These pearls are natural, not cultured, and the diamond accents are flawless. I'd estimate this piece at around $12,000, possibly more. My heart stopped. $12,000? I'd been hoping the entire collection might bring in a few hundred. Are you certain? I asked, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Absolutely certain, he replied, moving to the emerald earrings. And these emeralds are Colombian, natural stones with exceptional clarity. The gold setting is 18 karat, and the workmanship is from the 1940s, I'd guess. These are easily worth $8,000. I felt dizzy. If his evaluations were accurate, Mrs. Henderson's jewelry collection was worth more than I made in an entire year. My 20% commission would be enough to cover Danny's tuition several times over. Mr. Davidson picked up the gold bracelet, examining the intricate engravings with obvious admiration. This is perhaps the most interesting piece, he said. It's hand-engraved, probably European, definitely pre-war. The gold content is exceptional, and the artistic value adds significantly to its worth. I'd estimate this at around $6,000. $26,000 total. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what this meant for Danny's future, for Mrs. Henderson's financial security, for my own life. The commission alone would give me more financial breathing room than I'd ever had. Your neighbor is sitting on a small fortune, Mr. Davidson said with a warm smile. These pieces have been well cared for and maintained. She clearly understood their value, even if she wasn't certain of the exact amounts. I thought about Mrs. Henderson, living modestly in her small apartment, rationing her medications and eating simple meals to stretch her Social Security check. She had no idea she owned jewelry worth more than most people's cars. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to properly evaluate these, I said, my voice thick with emotion. The man who was helping me before barely looked at them. Mr. Davidson's expression darkened slightly. Marcus's behavior was completely unacceptable. No customer should ever be treated the way you were treated today, regardless of their appearance or perceived economic status. Prestige Fine Jewelers has built its reputation on treating every client with respect and professionalism. He paused, studying my face with kind eyes. You mentioned these pieces relate to your brother's college tuition? I found myself telling him about Danny, about his brilliant mind and his dreams of becoming an engineer, about the scholarship that covered most of his expenses but not quite all. I told him about my months of saving and sacrificing, about working double shifts and selling plasma, about how this commission would finally make Danny's education possible. "Your brother is fortunate to have someone who believes in him so completely," Mr. Davidson said. "Education is the greatest gift we can give to the next generation. It's an investment that pays dividends for entire families and communities." What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about wealth, privilege, and the responsibility that comes with having power to help others. Mr. Davidson excused himself briefly, returning with Marcus and another man I hadn't seen before. Marcus looked uncomfortable and kept glancing between Mr. Davidson and me with obvious confusion. "Marcus," Mr. Davidson said calmly, "I'd like you to explain to me your evaluation process for these jewelry pieces." Marcus shifted nervously. "Well, sir, as I mentioned, I could tell immediately that they weren't valuable items. The settings looked inexpensive, and the stones appeared to be synthetic." "I see," Mr. Davidson replied. "And how long did you spend examining them?" "I didn't need long, sir. Experience teaches you to recognize quality quickly." Mr. Davidson nodded thoughtfully, then turned to the other man. "James, would you please provide Marcus with the written evaluation I've just completed?" James handed Marcus a detailed appraisal sheet. As Marcus read it, his face went completely white. His hands actually trembled as he realized the magnitude of his error. $26,000, Mr. Davidson said quietly. "That's the conservative estimate for this collection. Marcus, you just attempted to turn away a client carrying more valuable inventory than most of our regular customers bring in during an entire month." The silence in the consultation area was deafening. Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times, clearly trying to find words that wouldn't make the situation worse. "More importantly," Mr. Davidson continued, "you treated this young woman with disrespect and suspicion, making assumptions based entirely on her appearance, rather than conducting yourself with the professionalism this establishment demands." I realized then that Mr. Davidson wasn't just another customer. The way Marcus and James deferred to him, the way his words seemed to carry absolute authority, suggested he held significant power within the store, possibly ownership. "Sir, I can explain," Marcus began, but Mr. Davidson held up a hand to stop him. "The explanation is simple, Marcus. You allowed your personal biases to override your professional judgment. You saw someone who didn't fit your preconceived notion of what a valuable client should look like, and you decided they weren't worth your time or courtesy." Mr. Davidson turned to me with an apologetic expression. "On behalf of Prestige Fine Jewelers, I want to formally apologize for the treatment you received today. It was completely unacceptable and does not represent the values this establishment was built on." "Thank you," I said quietly. "I appreciate that more than you know." "However," Mr. Davidson continued, "an apology isn't sufficient. Actions have consequences. And behavior like Marcus's damages not only individual customers but our entire reputation in the community." He turned back to Marcus with an expression that was calm but unmistakably serious. "Marcus, your employment with Prestige Fine Jewelers is terminated, effective immediately. Please gather your personal belongings and leave the premises." Marcus looked stunned. "Sir, please, I've worked here for 15 years. I have a family, a mortgage. This was just a misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Mr. Davidson replied firmly. "This was a choice. You chose to treat a customer with disrespect based on her appearance. You chose to make assumptions rather than doing your job professionally. Those choices have consequences." As security escorted Marcus out, I felt a complex mix of emotions. While I was glad to see some justice for the humiliation I'd experienced, I also felt sorry for Marcus's family, who would suffer for his poor judgment. Mr. Davidson seemed to read my thoughts. "Kindness and justice aren't always comfortable companions," he said gently. "But creating a culture where all people are treated with dignity requires that we not tolerate behavior that undermines that goal." He gestured for James to join us. "James, I'd like you to handle the sale of these pieces for Mrs. Henderson. I want full provenance documentation, insurance appraisals, and our premium service package. And I want zero commission charged to either Mrs. Henderson or Sarah here." "Sir, that's very generous, but you don't need to," I began, but Mr. Davidson waved away my objection. "Consider it an investment in education," he said with a smile. Your brother's engineering degree might lead to innovations that benefit all of us. Besides, prestige can afford to forego one commission to right a wrong. Over the next hour, James handled all the paperwork with meticulous care and genuine professionalism. Mrs. Henderson's jewelry would be sold to private collectors and serious investors, ensuring she received the full value of her treasures. My 20% commission, even after James's professional service fees, would total just over $5,000. It was more money than I'd ever had at one time in my life. Enough for Danny's tuition with money left over for his books and living expenses. Enough to give him a real chance at the future he deserved. As the paperwork was finalized, Mr. Davidson and I found ourselves alone again in the consultation area. "Can I ask you something?" I said hesitantly. "You obviously hold a significant position here, but you treated me with such kindness from the moment you intervened. Why?" Mr. Davidson was quiet for a moment, looking thoughtful. 30 years ago," he said finally, "I was a young man starting my own business with nothing but determination and a dream. I walked into a bank wearing my only suit, which wasn't very good, carrying a business plan I'd written by hand because I couldn't afford a typewriter." He smiled at the memory. The loan officer took one look at me and decided I wasn't worth his time. He was rude, dismissive, and made me feel like my dreams were foolish fantasies. I left that bank humiliated and discouraged. "What changed?" I asked. The next bank I visited had a loan officer named Mrs. Chen. She looked past my appearance, listened to my ideas, and gave me the chance that first man refused. That loan allowed me to start the business that eventually became successful enough to purchase this store and 6 others like it. Mr. Davidson's eyes grew distant. Mrs. Chen taught me that dignity isn't determined by wealth or status. It's determined by how we treat each other, especially when we have the power to lift someone up or tear them down. I never forgot that lesson. As I prepared to leave Prestige Fine Jewelers that afternoon, my mind was reeling from everything that had happened. I'd walked in expecting possible disappointment, and instead found validation, justice, and enough money to change my family's future. But more than the financial windfall, I'd learned something profound about the nature of character and the ripple effects of both cruelty and kindness. Marcus's prejudice had cost him his job and his reputation. Mr. Davidson's compassion had not only helped me, but had also reinforced the values that made his business successful. "Thank you," I said to Mr. Davidson as we shook hands goodbye. "Not just for helping with the jewelry, but for treating me like I mattered." "You do matter," he replied simply. "Everyone does. And I hope that when your brother becomes a successful engineer, he'll remember that success includes the responsibility to help others climb the ladder behind him." That evening, I called Danny with the news about his tuition being secured. I called Mrs. Henderson to tell her about her unexpected windfall. Both conversations were filled with tears of joy and gratitude. But I also found myself thinking about the broader implications of what had happened. How many other people had been turned away from opportunities because someone in power couldn't see past surface appearances? How many dreams had been deferred or destroyed because kindness was rationed based on perceived worth? The experience at Prestige Fine Jewelers became a turning point in my life, not just financially but philosophically. I realized that every interaction we have with another person is an opportunity to either build them up or tear them down, to either expand their possibilities or limit their horizons. 6 months later, Danny is thriving at State University, excelling in his engineering courses and already talking about graduate school. Mrs. Henderson used her jewelry money to pay off her house and establish a small emergency fund that gives her security in her golden years. As for me, I left my job at Miller's Diner and used my remaining commission money to enroll in business courses at the community college. I'm learning about retail management, customer service, and ethical business practices. My dream is to eventually open my own store, one where every customer is treated with the dignity and respect that Mr. Davidson showed me. The most important lesson from that day isn't about the power of wealth or the importance of expensive jewelry. It's about the choice we all have, regardless of our station in life, to treat each other with basic human decency. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story, everyone has dreams, and everyone deserves to be seen as worthy of respect. Sometimes the most transformative moments in our lives come disguised as ordinary encounters: a trip to a jewelry store, a chance meeting with a stranger, a moment when someone chooses kindness over judgment. These moments remind us that the world is full of Mr. Davidsons and Marcuses, and each of us gets to decide which kind of person we want to be. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.